Hello and welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stover. My guest today was educated at the Ahmadu Bello University Zaria and the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. She holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in development studies. Now, her career actually started in the private sector. But over the years, she had stints in the public sector. I'll just go ahead and briefly give you a background of my guest today. She was at one time in the Bureau of Public Enterprises. You, of course, would recall the BPE, which had to do with the privatization of the government of the day. From 2000 to 2004, at some point, she was a special assistant in project implementation to the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory. And of course, she has been in politics, been a member of the governing All Progressives Congress, the APC. She was in a number of committees, a few of them, the APC Strategy Committee, which we understand was largely responsible for the development of the party's manifesto. She was also in the APC's National Elections Planning Committee. Sometime in 2015, she was appointed Chief of Staff to the Governor of Kaduna State. That was the position she held until sometime in 2016 in July, when she was appointed Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority. Let's welcome Hadiza Bella Usman. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Right. There's so much to talk about Nigerian ports and what you've been able to do there. But let's start from the premise that at the time you were appointed as Managing Director of Nigerian Ports Authority, there were quite a number of people who were a little bit surprised. And from some quarters, it was felt that you hadn't been in anything to do with ports administration. So what were you going to bring to the Nigerian Ports Authority? How did you feel at that point in time?
I'll say I just focused on getting the job done. I focused on learning and understanding the sector. I believe it's about hard work, it's about commitment and dedication. So when I was appointed, there were a lot of comments around the fact that I was seen to be young, I was seen to lack some experience in the maritime sector. But I always felt that those disadvantages would form an advantage for you, because I seem young. I'm not young to that extent. Maybe in the Nigerian context, I'm young, but I think you're at a prime age where you're able to really take on the task that is required. As a CEO of such an organization, you need to have all your energy, all your faculty. So being perceived to be young is an added advantage. So you can work longer hours, you can, crunch the numbers more effectively. You're able to, drive the agency as much as you can. You're also able to push the boundaries and sort of, challenge status quo because of that youthful exuberance, I'll say, and that capacity for taking on challenges. And also, as it relates to the maritime experience. I felt that coming into a sector that you're new in would enable you have a larger sort of purview to learn and to understand without having any entrenched interests that could sort of prevent you from taking certain critical decisions. So coming in with that, I'll say open mind, just trying to reform and do what you know is the right thing, looking at the statutory requirements and statutory responsibilities, also comparing them with compliance with regulatory functions. So not being in the industry enabled me just come and say, you know, I don't want to know who is who. I'm just here to ensure everything is done in the right way. So every disadvantage that people perceive as a disadvantage is actually an advantage. So also, I'll say being a woman, because Nigerian Ports has never had a female managing director in its 63 years of existence. That was also another angle to it, because the maritime industry is dominated by men. So that perception that you're a woman would sort of, I'll say, make people believe you may not be able to do what is required. So I just, you know, didn't take on all of that, but focused on learning and getting the job done.
You used the term challenging the status quo. Now, coming in, though, you know, to head an organization that was largely peopled by, you know, personnel who had considerable experience in the maritime sector, you didn't think there would be some kind of daunting challenges in terms of getting things done? Was there resistance from inside, from within? If there were comments from outside, was there any form of resistance from within?
Well, from within, it was more like, oh, let's watch and see what she can do. Let's watch and see how much she can understand what we're saying. And in typical sectors, they usually have all their maritime jargon where they say all those things, trying to confuse you. But I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I've been like that. My father brought us up to be avid readers. So I sort of ensured I read ahead of everything. So I prepared for every meeting. I had all the reports and I read through every document that was brought to me. So learning all of that made them, after a while, realize that, oh, you know, you might not know this today, but you've been able to catch up within a short period because of your capacity to absorb and your capacity to question everything that is brought around you. So yes, I saw that at the beginning, but within a short period, they realized that, you know, once you put your head down and you're reading, you would understand it.
All right. The Nigerian Ports Authority is a tough organization, and I use the term tough because it had been bedeviled by numerous challenges. And while not wanting to go back to what the ports looked like in the past, we would just ask that you stepped in and what can we say is the state of the Nigerian ports today?
We have tremendously improved. On the one side, when we look at our revenues, revenue generations have improved. Our contribution to the consolidated revenue funds are in fact one of the areas where we've tremendously improved. We have contributions of 30 billion, 31 billion within the last 2 years. That has been the first time the Nigerian Ports Authority is contributing that magnitude of funds to the consolidated revenue funds. So you can see that differential to the extent that we're able to block revenue leakages and ensure debts are paid to the authority in a timely manner. We've also embarked on reforms around compliance with the activities of the terminal operators. As you're aware, we're running a landlord model of a port where we've concessioned the terminals. They're being run by private sector. And our role is to ensure they're complying, ensure they're making the necessary payments as at when due, and also ensuring they're committed to the development plans. And the development plans are developments that they're required to do as when they take on the terminal, i.e. repair certain quaysides and develop certain warehouses, certain developments that need to be built. So all of these things are what we've instituted to make sure that the authority in regulating is clear to the areas it's regulating. And an integral part of that is ensuring that there are sanctions for non-compliance on both sides, meaning that if a private terminal operator does not meet up its obligation in terms of certain aspects of the concession agreement, there's a sanctioning. On the other side, if federal government, through the Nigerian Ports, does not meet its own obligation, there's also a sanctioning and penalty. So it cuts across both ways. That way, everybody is regulated and there's clarity on obligations and compliance.
You talk about increased revenue, as much as 30 billion. So the question is, what was it that you had to do to shore up revenue to that extent? And what was it? You talked about blocking leakages. Where were these leakages coming from? There was a time it was thought that, well, go to the ports and it's a gold mine at the ports.
Yeah, it was the ports were seen to be some area where there's slush funds for political activities, as it were. But what we sought to do is, as it relates to revenue leakages, to ensure like automation, where payments are made directly to the coffers of the government, where there is no area where a third party would be required to make payments to a middle agent, and then the agent pays to the government, but ensuring everything goes to TSA. One of the important things that we've done is removing any third-party obligation. So if there's a revenue that is generated for the government, it should go directly to the government. And any payment the government needs to do would come outside of that. So no entity can, for example, deduct at source for any such revenue collection it's doing on behalf of the government. We also sought to reduce our own overhead costs to focus on capital expenditure, so that way it reduces the ratio of capital to recurrent and also enables us to have revenues that we can now make payment to the consolidated revenue funds. Even within the years, I'll quickly reference 2018, we had 189 billion naira revenues for period to October 2018, and in the same period in 2019 we now have 224 billion naira. So you can see there's an incremental increase in the revenue we're generating. That is also attributable to the fact that we're streamlining the activities of the shipping companies, ensuring the shipping companies also comply, and putting in place mechanisms that would enable ease of doing business into the Nigerian ports. So working closely with the agencies that operate in the port to drive that revenue target that we've set for ourselves.
Good. Shipping companies, ease of doing business. The story of the Nigerian Ports Authority was one that you could say you'd look in the dictionary and for the word congestion.
Yes.
And an NPA would pop up.
Yes.
What happened and how have you been able to address that? And what is the situation now with regards to activities at the ports?
We're still working on improving the congestion. Congestion still exists, and I'll quickly speak to the role of Nigerian ports. A lot of people, when their cargo comes into the country and their cargo doesn't get to their warehouse, they just scream, "Oh, Nigerian ports, we don't have our cargo in our warehouse." So our role is, one, to ensure that the vessels come into the Fairway Buoy, which is the entrance of the channel, and it's piloted and navigated safely into the channel, and it's berthed by our pilots, and the cargoes are offloaded from the vessel onto the terminals. So once the cargo is offloaded from the vessel onto the terminal, at that point the activity now becomes that of inspection of the cargo by agencies that are mandated with inspecting the cargo. So at that point, Nigerian Ports really has no responsibility once your cargo has reached the point where it's been discharged by the terminal operator. Then it's waiting for inspection. Then there comes in agencies of government, i.e. Nigerian Customs and every other agency. They now have to come and examine that cargo, inspect it, and then that cargo can be released. So some of the challenges we have is around the issue of inspection of cargo. Currently, we do not have operational scanners in the ports, for example, the Lagos ports. So that makes it difficult. So every cargo is inspected physically. Cargoes are not inspected with a scanner.
But that's a big issue, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Manual inspection of, I mean, if you imagine the huge numbers
Yes.
of what comes in there, and to think you have to do this manually.
Yes.
And people are wondering, it's the year 2019.
I know. So the Ministry of Finance has embarked on a procurement. I think it's even been awarded over a year ago to procure items for scanning. But these, I also say, do not fall under our purview. But our own key performance indicators are tied to other agencies performing.
Right.
So literally, whatever we do to ensure the vessels come in quickly and they're berthed and cargoes are discharged. So if we're not able to efficiently inspect those cargo and they're getting out of the port, that creates, on the one hand, a challenge. And the next leg to the challenge is the issue of connection to hinterland. So in a normal environment, you have intermodal transportation system that evacuates cargo from the port, meaning cargo will be evacuated by rail, by road, by inland waterways, and by liquid pipelines for liquid bulk. So currently, I'll say 90% of the cargo coming into Nigeria are evacuated by road. So you can imagine the weight of the tonnage of all those cargo would ply on our roads. The number of containers that come in would go by road. So that immediately translates into congestion. So what we're doing is, as you're aware, there's an aggressive rail project that the federal government is embarking on. And with that, we're linking it to the ports, taking the rail tracks all the way to the quayside so that cargoes are offloaded directly and then the cargoes are taken out to the hinterland. So instituting that intermodal cargo evacuation is critical, and which ideally we should have done from the get-go, and ensuring that those are functional. We have like marginal rail connection to Apapa. The rail connections do not have wagons, they do not have effective interconnection. So I'll say it's non-existent. As I said, 90% of the cargo come on the road. And also in the Apapa environs, we have the tank farms. These are for petroleum products, and these petroleum products are evacuated through tankers. So ideally, they should be evacuated by liquid bulk pipelines so that they do not institute that congestion. So currently, these are the things that make it a physical issue in terms of movement of containers and cargo out of the Lagos port. For instance, that is a challenge that we're currently resolving.
Would it be a fair comment to say that over the years, because we do know that at different times, government had set up task forces to clear the ports, and so would it be a fair comment to say over the years there hasn't been any concerted effort to really find a solution to this problem, and so all we've had ad hoc?
Well, the concerted effort, I'll say, is instituting intermodal transportation by moving a percentage of the cargo. For example, 40% of the cargo should go on rail. So currently the government is doing that. So that is a clear concerted effort to remove the idea of having all cargo go on the road. The next leg is that we are working with Ogun State government, Lagos State government, and Nigerian ports on instituting trailer parks. So that way, if a trailer is coming to the port environment, it actually will start off from Ogun State, where there will be a trailer park, linking it with an electronic call-up. So you start off in a trailer park in Ogun State. Once you're called upon, you now drive to another trailer park in Lagos State, large trailer parks. And when you're ready for your cargo, either drop off or pick up, then you move to Lily Pond Trailer Park, which is at the mouth, at the entrance of the port, and you go in. So that way, there is a clear, seamless electronic process where trailers are just not driving into the port. So another issue is a lot of trailer owners wake up in the morning and drive to the port environment because that is where they go to look for their business. So they park elsewhere during a weekend or a Sunday. So if you go to the port environment on a Sunday, you don't see the trucks. But on a Tuesday, everybody is driving there trying to look for business. So what I'm forcing them to accept is you need to be housed in a trailer park. Stay there, except if you've been called upon to either drop off a cargo or pick up a cargo. And that has to be done electronically. And the land for those trailer parks has to be provided by the state governments. So Ogun State, Lagos State, we're now working, and by the end of this year, we're going to sign a joint venture agreement where the state governments and Nigerian ports would build those trailer parks and deploy an electronic call-up. So these, for me, are lasting solutions, providing intermodal transportation, instituting trailer park with a call-up system, as opposed to having, just as you mentioned, an ad hoc solution where, we would clear out the port entrance. I think it's beyond that, is putting in place infrastructure and mechanisms that are sustainable.
Well, how much of this is in the public space? Because let's face it, whatever activities go on at the ports, in the long run, the ports would just be seen generally as, well, this is a Nigerian port, it's a Lagos port, and this is happening. I'm talking about, the clearing of cargo, and the fact that over years there had always been challenges with the numbers of agencies that are charged with different responsibilities. At some point in time, there would be one directive reduced to the barest minimum, and a few months later, everyone is back at the port.
Well, we do have the number of agencies that are allowed to operate in the port, and one of the important things is they're required to do a one-stop inspection. So every agency should come together and have that interface where everything is done as a team. You can't keep going back and forth on the inspection. So these are some of the directives that were contained in the executive order from the Ease of Doing Business Council, where all agencies that have inspection rights for cargo that come in needs to do it at the same time. Also, on boarding of vessels for inspection, they must board the vessel for inspecting the vessel when it comes together as a team, as opposed to each agency going by themselves. So currently, the executive order exists and there is a level of compliance, but also, as I said, it's important for us to keep checking. So any agency that does not comply, there needs to be sanctioning. And one of the important aspects of governance that I think we must imbibe is consequences for action and inaction. So if an agency of government, for example, chooses to refuse to be part of a joint inspection, that agency needs to be, there should be consequences for that action or inaction by refusing to comply to an executive order. So these are the things that we that are in the port report to say, oh, this agency has not been complying, and that agency should be sanctioned, and upon sanctioning, we will see a compliance by the agency.
Well, so far we would think that what we've been talking about is more evident in the Lagos ports, you know, Tinkan, rest of them. But there are other ports, yes. And we wonder what is the state of those ports. Warri, for instance, Port Harcourt, Onne. Let's talk about them and see, because if Lagos is brought up to standard, then what happens to the other ports? And there are people who suggested that, look, if you could develop the other ports, then you would reduce to a great extent the challenges you have at the Lagos port. So let's hear what's on ground.
Yes, with the shipping industry, it's a destination of choice. So you determine where you want your cargo to go to. So some of the reasons why, for example, consignees choose Lagos port is, to a certain extent, some of the cargoes are consumed within the Lagos Ogun State industrial cluster. So there is that. The other leg is to do with ease of transportation to the hinterland. So if you bring your cargo that is destined, for example, Kano, you have clarity on the fact that it comes and it gets on the road and it goes to Kano. So if you choose to say, oh, I'm going to take my cargo to Onne, so do I have clarity on the road navigation? Is there articulated trucks? Can articulated trucks navigate the route from Onne to, for example, Kano? Where would my cargo, where's the final destination of my cargo? So this informs the reason why people choose a certain location for their cargo. So I'll speak to the state of our ports. We call them the eastern ports. So we have the Calabar port. Our Calabar port has a limited draft. It has a very long channel, which requires for us to do extensive dredging. And some of the volumes of the dredging works that are required are beyond the revenues that could be realized from the port. So in the last 2018, we're given a cost estimate of 50 billion to dredge Calabar Channel to 10-meter draft. And that amount is way beyond the revenues that we can generate within the whole environment.
So, okay, so if I get you correctly,
yes.
You think about the viability
Absolutely.
of that port.
Absolutely.
It's not just a question of
no.
throwing money at development of...
No. You have to look at the viability of the revenues that it will generate. Also looking at other options. So when we look at the numbers, then we explore the options of having flat bottom vessels. Flat bottom vessels are vessels that do not require the depth of draft, meaning that they're not deep, they don't need that volume of dredging. So we actively sought and marketed the Calabar port for flat bottom vessels, and we're able to get flat bottom vessels come and berth in Calabar. So in the last, I would say, maybe years and years, no vessel had berthed in Calabar, but we got 2 flat bottom vessels to come into Calabar and berth safely. And so these are, I'll say, the type of innovations you need to do. You need to think outside the box and look at a solution that works with what you have. And these flat bottom vessels have come and is attracting more of such to enable patronage to Calabar port. I would also now speak on Port Harcourt. In the first time in almost 50 years, a container vessel berthed in Calabar, in Port Harcourt in October. So that is also a huge feat, because we are working targeting the shipping companies, marketing to them specifically and telling them what is it that you require to enable you bring your vessel here. We would ensure that we have the necessary tugboats. In addition, we also give a discount to encourage vessel owners to call in the eastern ports. We give a 10% discount on harbour dues, specifying the volumes of cargoes that would attract that discount. So we are now looking at how we can possibly even increase that discount to attract them to use the eastern ports. Moving to Warri Port in 2018, we dredged Warri Port to 7-meter draft, and that has improved completely the volumes of traffic that are going to Warri. These volumes of cargo are usually the petroleum products that are brought in from Warri, and that has changed. We have an increase of over 50% of revenue from Warri Port. So we are mindful of that, and we're investing on ensuring that the ports are attractive and also giving the necessary discount to attract vessel owners to call in that place. At the same time, we've also written to Ministry of Works to highlight some of these linkage roads, because it's important that the connection to the hinterland from those ports are rehabilitated. That way, articulated trucks can navigate and connect those ports to the necessary location. And I'll quickly reference a particular road that the Ministry of Works has awarded, which we have been writing them in Calabar to reconstruct the Ecom Bridge, which would facilitate cargo evacuation from Calabar ports to the northeast part of the country.
So it brings into focus collaboration with other government agencies, because no matter how you develop the ports, you're still to a large extent dependent on certain infrastructure that you do not control, the roads,
Yes.
for instance. And
Yes.
even as shippers determine where to take their cargo to, such infrastructure as roads would help them make a decision.
Absolutely.
And so if you can get this collaboration going on a sound footing, it does mean that these infrastructure can be developed, and it could also translate to better performances at your ports.
Yes,
right?
indeed. It's a very integral part of what we do. We've been collaborating extensively with Ministry of Works, and we, for example, as I mentioned, the road in Calabar has been awarded. The Tinkan Island Road also has been awarded. So we are making traction. We are seeing that concise commitment from Federal Ministry of Works to ensure that port roads are given priority consideration. So the ports are the gateway to our economy, and I think there's a need to ensure that priority is given to those roads that connect the ports to the hinterland and every other part of the country.
Do you think sometimes the public misunderstands this? Because everyone talks about the congestion going to the ports, and they just look at it and say, look, what are they doing in the ports?
Yeah, everyone says that it's a Ports Authority. No, thinks that the road linking to the port all the way to the gateway is not Nigerian Ports Authority. The rail linkage that should institute cargo evacuation is not Nigerian ports. The need to ensure that our cargo are scanned, we do not do physical examination, does not lie with the Nigerian ports. So there are a lot of issues that in the minds of an average person, he just thinks it's Nigerian ports. But I keep saying we're all government on the other side, so we must stop giving excuses and work together in ensuring that these activities are done in a seamless way.
Okay, let me take you back a little bit, and that's still talking about the ports, and as you mentioned, areas we call the eastern ports. There is an allegation that there isn't much will to develop eastern ports. You'd like to respond to that?
Well, I think it's intangible when you look at the amount of revenues that are deployed to those ports. For example, the Onne port is one of our ports that has huge, very excellent infrastructure, and Nigerian government has invested tremendously in building Onne port. So for people to allege that there's a sort of disregard for the eastern ports is completely incorrect. One of the issues that discourages vessel owners also is the issue of insecurity calling into the eastern ports. As you're aware, there are activities of militants in that environment, and for every vessel owner that calls, one, he needs to take a war risk insurance for their vessel. Two, they need to even hire private armed security to escort their vessels. So these are all additional costs that discourages vessel owners from calling there, discourages consignees from going to those locations. So we need to look beyond what is seen as abandonment, but ensuring that you have an attractive business environment that attracts business entities to come and operate. So when they run the numbers to say, oh, if I take my cargo to, for example, Lagos ports, I don't need to hire armed security escort to escort my vessel. I don't need to invest this amount of money on security. So that automatically has an impact on the choice of picking, I'll say, a port in that location. So Nigerian government and indeed Nigerian ports has no preferential consideration for any ports. We seek to improve across the board all the infrastructure and automation capacity in all port locations.
Right, this next question I'd hoped we'll talk about it later, but since we're within the area,
Yes.
let's stay there. And this is talking about the rivers ports. And of recent, a huge controversy brewed
Yes.
Between the Ports Authority and a private company. Of course, you know what I'm talking
Yes,
about.
I
I'm
do.
referring to the Rivers Port Terminal B, as you
Yes,
call it, yes.
yes.
And this controversy between the NPA and the company, and that's talking about the concessioning. Let's hear from you direct this time.
Yes. We had a what happened?
Yes, yes.
So we concessioned a terminal to a terminal operator, and part of the development plans included the fact that certain quays were supposed to be rehabilitated. These quays were weak, so there's a need to reconstruct those quays, and the concession was done in 2006, and the terminal operator was required to do those activities within 90 days. Fast forward in 2016, this terminal operator had not embarked on those. So you can see from 2006 to 2016, that's 10 years. So 10 years post committing to doing this work in 19 days, 90 days you hadn't done it. We now, in February 2016, before I joined the authority, a default notice was served on this terminal operator. In February, another one was served again twice in February on default on non-compliance to rehabilitating those quays. I joined in July, and then we continued with issuing the notices. We issued another one in July to them for non-compliance, and we gave them 4 months to revert back to the authority for them to reconstruct. 4 months in November, no such thing from the terminal operator, so we served them a notice of termination. So if you look at, you're required to do something in 90 days and you didn't do it in 10 years, you know, that's evident. You clearly have not complied. We, of course, upon termination, the terminal operator went to court, obtained a court injunction to prevent us from taking occupation of the site. And of course, we complied with the court order and permitted them to utilize the premise. They continued utilizing the premise. Fast forward in May this year, 2019, from 2018 to date, they were using it. They wrote us another letter saying to us that these quays have totally collapsed, they're a cause of concern, they're so dilapidated, they're really a safety concern. And automatically, as a responsible regulator, we now decommission the terminal, we decommission the quays, because you cannot keep operating a terminal when you yourself have confirmed that that quay is at a point of collapse.
So where are we missing it here?
Well,
the company says your actions are in breach of...
in breach of, yes. So one of the things that...
injunction.
Yes, yeah. So we're served with a content of court for decommissioning. And, you know, I just beg to question that if a terminal, the quays are at the point of collapse, the jetty has collapsed, you wrote it's collapsed. So as a responsible regulator, safety is first. We must decommission to talk about how we need to rehabilitate it. But in fact, there's some of the issues that they reference around the fact that the government did not comply with dredging the channels, with dredging the, providing dredging works and certain items. So we also, you know, said, yes, we didn't do that as required, but ab initio within that period, you have been using the terminal. Between the period of the injunction, 177 vessels were berthed by you between 2018 to 2019. Just this year, 43 vessels were berthed by you between January to May before it was decommissioned. So with the limited draft limitation, you are still able to conduct your activities. And more so, there's also a reference to the fact that there was vandalization. Some steel were cut in the jetty area within the quaysides. There were security concerns about vandals coming in to cut off. And what we said is this activity happened in 2014. You are required to rehabilitate it in 2006. So the reason why some of these still were exposed was to the extent that you did not rehabilitate within the period you're required to do it. So coming to cite the fact that that happened as a basis with which you didn't do what you're supposed to do in 90 days, in 10 years, that's 2016. When you add up to 2019, that's 12 years. I am curious as to where the issue is. And importantly, I always speak to the fact that people trying to intimidate or blackmail you by singing and dancing all manners of conflicting positions in the media will not change what is stipulated within the contractual obligations, will not change the position of the Nigerian ports as it relates to getting you to comply with your obligations. So we won't be having this conversation 12 years later if you had done your obligation within 90 days. That's what you're required to do. And if indeed you felt the circumstances surrounding your operations of that terminal were not favorable, you could have said, hold on, I can't operate this terminal anymore.
All right. Okay, we'll leave that controversy. There are other issues relating to certain decisions that have been taken by the management of the Nigerian Ports Authority, but we'll leave that a little later. I just like to recall that sometime in 2015, I believe, you were appointed as a member of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, you're head of an organization such as the Nigerian Ports Authority. Have you, or how have you been able to bring to bear transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption in an organization that was in the past regarded as cesspool corruption?
Yes, as I keep transparency and accountability are an integral part of what we do now in Nigerian ports. We have sought to put in place mechanisms to address that. And we have an anti-corruption and transparency unit, an ACTU unit in Nigerian ports that seeks to identify these areas and bring it up for our consideration. One of the, I'll say, important things is looking at third-party contractors and ensuring that they comply to whatever deployment they're required to do, ensuring strict compliance with remittances, ensuring that every process we embark upon is transparent and there's clarity in tracking those metrics around accountability. We've also worked on bringing our audit up to date so that our auditor financial statements are current, so we can see the gaps as it relates to, for example, some of our asset registers. Where are these assets that Nigerian Ports has? Some of the land we have, how much revenue are we generating for within those areas? So indeed, the fact that my membership of that committee has gone a long way in entrenching anti-corruption mechanisms within the authority and also streamlining our activities. So if you go to Nigerian Ports now, you would not see my office, you won't see the crowd of people there trying to see the MD because there's nothing to see me about. Everything you need to do, you go and bid, there's a tender process. So all of that are things that we have put in place that also to remove subjectivity. One of the things that I'm keen to do is to remove subjectivity from the chief executive officer, so that way there's a process that you, even as a CEO, cannot interfere with. Putting in place that thing that removes you. As I mentioned, for example, with the terminal operators, if you don't comply, this is a sanction, and it cuts across all the terminal operators, not for you to single out one person and give them a tenure extension, or single out one person and give them
How easy is it to do that? Because,
very tough.
we're coming from a background where the buck always stops at the desk of the chief executive, and everything you need to do now, you've got to know. You've got to know someone, or you've got to know someone who knows someone.
Which is one of the important things that I've put in place, is that there's a process that even as CEO you cannot interfere with, meaning that there are clear guidelines. And that takes away your subjectivity and allows the procedure to take its place. And also to demystify the process of governance, because some of the things that we government officials do, since it is a hoard information, so you don't know, people come asking, oh, what's the procedure? And that way rent seeking comes in. So when there is no avenue for rent seeking, it allows for once you know a process and the process is seamless, then there's no need for rent seeking. And I think that is important, and that takes away that environment that creates such.
What's productivity like these days at the Ports Authority? I mean, you didn't have to remove everyone and bring in angels from the sky, as they say. So what is the driving force with your personnel and keen into the new way of doing things?
Well, I think it's leadership by example, being there to show that and the capacity you bring to the table. I am on my desk by 8 a.m. In the last 3 years that I've been in Nigerian Ports, I get to work at 8. And typically when the CEO is there, everybody tries to be there as much as possible, so you can clearly see that. So when you have turnaround time for reports, turnaround time for memos, so if the CEO is able to turn around all of this report within 24 to 48 hours, who are you not to do that? So automatically you can see that clear increase in commitment, clear increase in deploying the resources that are required. And also when you can't get to the CEO to change a position, then the issue of rent seeking reduces, because it's of no value for me to rent seek with you down there when, you know, I don't need to do anything, you know, my process would go through seamless. So that really creates an environment where it engenders confidence of citizens, where they feel their issues will be taken up.
Okay, interesting. Let's now go back to some of those tough decisions that have become controversial in the public space. And this time around, we'll talk about the secure anchorage area.
Yes.
That's a big one. And for long, it was thought that the Nigerian Navy had an arrangement with a particular company to secure certain parts where ships could berth in.
Yes.
The NPA has decided to do away with that, and there are all sorts of issues arising from that. So we'd like to get the record straight. First, we'll examine what led to it, and perhaps, maybe we might just ask, is there any political undertone in this matter? Because the first thing they said is, look, it's because a certain owner of the company belongs to the opposition party and is threatening something to do with the All Progressives Congress. Is that true?
Well, that's completely not true. Once there's an issue, people tend to give it political coloration without looking at the details of the content of that issue. So I'll speak around the safe anchorage area, as you referenced, but politicizing decisions around Nigerian ports are not new. They've been doing it for a while, and I keep pushing back to say, look at the details and see what is political about that. So with the safe anchorage area, Nigerian Navy partnered with a private company to institute an area where they marked as safe anchorage area, meaning vessel owners could come and anchor there, and they're required to pay. I think it's $2,500 on the first day. I think $1,500 every other subsequent day, and waiting to come in or to anchor. So in Nigerian ports, the anchorage is determined by Nigerian Ports and the Ministry of Transportation. So one, Nigerian Navy and indeed any private company cannot declare anchor or anchorage without Nigerian Ports being a party to it. And the second leg is, we all speak about the cost of doing business in Nigeria. We all speak about how expensive it is to call into Nigerian ports. And these are one of the areas that increase the cost of doing business in Nigeria. So if we consciously want to reduce cost of doing business, there are areas where we need to look at to reduce those costs. One, Nigerian Navy and NIMASA are required to provide security in the waterways, and that is their statutory responsibility. To the extent that they're having challenges in funding that, they should speak to other agencies of government so that we can deploy resources for you to do your statutory requirements without transferring the costs directly to vessel owners. It's our duty, and we should secure the anchorage and ensure that vessel owners feel safe to call in Nigeria. But for us to now give a third party that work to do, and that third party is charging the vessel owners, and the revenue doesn't come to Nigerian ports. I don't know if Nigerian Navy is collecting that revenue from them, but that amount of money is not coming to us. So why are we doing that when it is the duty of Navy? And as I keep referencing, if Nigerian Navy and NIMASA are challenged with resources, we should now sit around the table and see what is required to secure our anchorage. And we can now, as government, pool funds together to provide that security. And just to say, Nigerian Ports does provide certain vessels to Nigerian Navy as a form of support for securing the waters, and some of these vessels are being used to secure the safe anchorage area. And indeed, Nigerian Ports is not getting any revenue, but primarily we must seek to reduce all of these bottlenecks that seek to increase the cost of doing business in our country. And I would also add on that, I don't know if you're aware, NIMASA is deploying a security architecture which is costing billions of dollars. They have embarked on procuring huge items of security gadgets, helicopters, and all of these items are to be deployed in what? The same waterways. So what form of duplicity do we see? Are we NIMASA is deploying this security architecture that's costing us, Nigerian government, billions of dollars, and vessel owners are being made to pay again. So you clearly see that, isn't it the same waterway? Yes. Is it the same anchor? Yes. So where are we trying to insist on having a third party provide a service when you, same government, have funded NIMASA to secure that area? So the deployment of the NIMASA security architecture is going to commence in January. So really, of what substance or significance is having a so-called safe anchorage area that is being manned by a private company? And it's also important for us to understand what it means for you to now hand over security aspect and to a third party to say, oh, so are we subletting a portion of the Nigerian Navy, subletting its statutory role to a private company? And in doing that, those revenues are being used to procure vessels. Will those vessels be owned by Nigerian Navy, or will those vessels be owned by that company? So there is a lack of clarity. On our part, Nigerian Ports, we have no legal relationship with the company. We've not signed any agreement with this company. And Nigerian Navy can clarify the form of relationship they have. Nigerian Navy can clarify where that $2,500 per day from 2014 for any vessel that may have called on day one, and then that amount for that period. So where is that money? Who does it go to? And why would we insist on having a secure anchorage area when we are securing the anchor?
Now that you've done away with that,
yes.
Well, what if insecurity worsens in
So what we've done is we have removed it from the notice to Marina, so it doesn't stand as a safe anchorage area. We have constituted a task force, Nigerian Navy and MPA. They've held meetings and they have brought up what is required for us to secure the anchorage pending when the NIMASA operations commence. And it's important also for us to understand that we should not do a double dipping or a double costing. NIMASA is costing the government that amount of money. So at the point where it comes in, the arrangement between Nigerian Navy and MPA that is currently being concluded would have to be cancelled, because we can't, as I keep saying, it's the same waterway, it's not any other waterway, it's the same area. So two entities cannot secure one place.
You're reported to have warned that if there is
yes, I did, and I'll do it again. Yes,
noticeable increase in insecurity in the waterways, then it would amount to something like sabotage, right?
Absolutely, because the Lagos waters have been safe, and I would like to say that it's safe not because of the safe anchorage area, because the safe anchorage area is securing that portion, is like identifying, oh, come and park your vessel here. So the security of the Lagos waters is not because of the safe anchorage area. The Lagos waters have been secure. So any incidental hike in insecurity around that area, it will be a form of sabotage. And I've said it, and I think it's important for us to recognize that and understand that we as a government must take concise effort to take tough decisions. There's nothing political about reducing the cost of doing business in Nigeria. There's nothing political about saying, Nigerian Navy, NIMASA, this is your job, you do it. I don't see anything political about that. I don't see anything APC or PDP about saying your statutory role is your statutory role. You shouldn't make vessel owners pay for that. And if you have a budgetary constraint, you raise it with your government. You raise it with the agencies that operate in that area, and we pull funds together to provide it. So I beg to question, what is political about that? We need to be clear about these things and understand it without allowing people to becloud that position and bring in narratives that are incorrect. So now that vessels are calling without paying $2,500 per day, what is politics about that? The only politics is that somebody that used to get $2,500 every day for a vessel calling is no more getting it. So I question what the politics is around that.
Well, as you look at the Ports Authority, let's say, what do you imagine Nigerian ports would look like? You do get Nigerians saying all the time that, oh, we wish that our ports could be like the ports in XYZ country. Of course, we do know that we always compare what we have and say, look, these are not of the standards we would like to. So what are the steps you're taking?
Yes, we are looking to have deep sea ports. Recently, Lekki Deep Sea Port has commenced. But one of the things, I'll speak about competitiveness of our ports, is that we need to have deep sea ports to enable us have the draft required. The shipping industry has moved to the draft of 15, 17 meter draft to enable larger vessels. Because of economies of scales, big vessels are what are being is a trend in the industry now. So we don't have any deep sea port. Our deepest ports are 13 meters. So Nigeria's competitiveness is tied to having deep sea ports. It's also tied to having automation. Automation meaning deploying of scanners, deploying of single windows, and automation where you can sit from your home and interact with every other agency as relates to clearing your cargo. So some of the issues around competition for our ports are the turnaround time of a vessel, meaning how long it takes it to offload and unload, and the exit time of cargo. So if you have a deeper port, meaning a deep sea port, you also have automation and scanners. So that is what makes our ports uncompetitive and becomes a challenge. So as I said, we have the Lekki Deep Sea Port, which they've started construction. We're looking at the Ibaka Deep Sea Port. We have a number of deep sea ports that are being proposed. So this is the future for us, where our ports are being competitive. I would like to quickly touch on the border closure.
Yes.
I don't know if...
Right, of course, certainly. That's all part of it, and the
Yes.
border closure and how it has affected business. And like you hear, I mean, it's a mixed bag, isn't
Yes,
it?
it
Sometimes you hear Nigerians complaining, oh, well, we need the borders open. But most times you hear the neighboring countries also are talking about opening the borders.
Yes. With the closure of the borders, I'm sure you're familiar with the referencing of the fact that cargoes are diverted, Nigerian cargoes are diverted to neighboring countries. We're losing because of that. And the closure of the border would show us to what extent are those goods legitimate goods that can come into the country. A significant portion of the cargoes that are diverted to neighboring countries are cargoes that are banned in Nigeria or have high tariff. So what people seek to do is to import it into the neighboring country and smuggle it into Nigeria. So those items cannot legitimately come into our ports. So now that the land borders are closed, everything has to come into the ports, meaning that items that are banned cannot come through. So that volume of so-called cargo diversions are typically volumes of items that are banned. So with the border closure from September to date, we're going to see the exact volume of legitimate cargo that are being diverted. And that volume would not be astronomical when you look at the cargo of banned items. So you see rice, you see automobiles being taken to neighboring countries, and that doesn't come here because of the high tariff and in some instances banned. So we're looking at the end of this quarter, end of this year, we're going to have the full quarter where all land borders are closed. And that data will be very interesting, which we'll share with you so you can see the impact on items that typically could have come in through the land borders. But you see the volumes are different because those items are now stuck in their country because they can't smuggle it into our country. And they can't come into our country legitimately. So there's those items, that cargo diversion is for items that are banned.
All right.
Yes.
Well, it's amazing how time flies. It's as if time has just run out on this program, and we're thinking there's so many things we'd like to talk about with you, and we're hoping you might come again sometimes for us to explore further the development of Nigerian ports and see how it's going. But on a final note, I find this irresistible.
Yes.
I just have to chip this in on a final note. How have you been able to take it? And this is a personal question this time. It's hard not to think about your father when they think about Hadiza Bala Usman. And you think people look at you and say, well, that's the chip of the old block, and that's Bala Usman really. Oh, you're your own person, and how do you cope with that?
I think they're like big shoes to fill. So every time I get to reference that, and so that keeps me on my toes. That keeps me understanding that I have a legacy, I have a name to protect. I'm not the. I need to understand that my father has invested his life being a person he is. So it's important for me and my siblings to also imbibe that work culture, that ethics, and yes, that's a big challenge. On the one hand, it's also, I'll say in me, because my default setting is to behave in that way. My default setting is to challenge status quo, is to question status quo, is to be very, I don't say confrontational, but willing to push the boundaries and question why this is done, irrespective of who you are. People's money, name doesn't deter me from pushing and doing what I believe is the right thing for the country.
All right. Hadiza Bala Usman, Managing Director, Nigerian Ports Authority. It's been interesting talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. And that's our program for today. Well, thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One on One. I am Cyril Stober. Bye for now.